Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our session entitled How Data Users Leverage the ACS for Outcomes. I'd like to welcome our moderator, Joel Alvarez, and then he'll introduce panelists Tom Bryan, Melinda Von Steen, Rodolfo Gutierrez, and Bob Coates after that to join us. Of course, Joel Alvarez is the director of the Population Division at New York City's Department of City Planning. Over the past 2 decades, he has worked closely with city agencies and civic organizations to employ census data to address the needs of the city, studying the demographic impact of 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy, providing targeted language assistance support, and working to alleviate the effects of poverty on young adults. Joel has also co-authored an ACS guidebook, devised a publicly available ACS map reliability calculator, and helped facilitate broad access to curated census data through the development of online sociodemographic applications. So now I hand things over to Joel. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana, and good morning to everyone joining us for this panel on how data users leverage the ACS for outcomes. So we learned a lot earlier about the ACS, what's new, some changes on the horizon, how you can access the data, and some great enhancements to resources, and how you can learn more about the ACS, and how you can join the ACS Data Users Group. We'll now hear from 4 panelists working in different fields across the country about how they use the ACS to achieve specific goals. I'll start by providing a little bit of background about each participant, and then I'll give each of them a chance to tell us specifically how they use ACS data and why it's so important to the work they do. Afterwards, I'll ask some follow-up questions, and then at about 12:15, we'll open it up to audience questions. And when you submit questions, please submit them through the Q&A tab. So let me introduce our first panelist. I'm going to go one by one with introductions. Our first panelist, Tom Bryan. Tom is a professional expert witness and the president of Bryan Geo Demo, or BGD, a boutique consulting firm specializing in redistricting, voting rights, and voter registration litigation. He has over 30 years of experience in demography, including at the Census Bureau, where he worked on the development of the ACS as a member of the Population Estimates and Projections branch. More recently, Tom was appointed to the 2030 Census Advisory Committee. Tom, please tell us more about your work and how you use ACS data.
Good morning, and thank you for the kind introduction. Let me share my slide. Are you able to see my slide, Joel?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My work as an expert witness involves many aspects of the law, data, analytics, and work to help litigate and adjudicate Voting Rights Act cases. The American Community Survey is foundational for our daily work on VRA cases. The most important data that we have out of the ACS are what are known as the Citizen Voting Age Population, or CVAP data. For those of you that want to know where that is in the large library of variables, it's B05003. These data are the foundation for the first of what are called Jingles preconditions. The Jingles preconditions are something that came out of a 1986 US Supreme Court case where they decided that there were a certain set of very specific rules that needed to be presented by plaintiffs and satisfied by plaintiffs in order to pursue and achieve a VRA claim. And the first of those 3 Jingles preconditions is that a racial or language minority group must be large and compact enough to constitute a majority in a single member district. The ACS data, which we use in order to analyze and adjudicate these Jingles 1 claims, are provided by the Census Bureau in the form of an annual, what is known as a special tabulation. It's not something that you can just find as part of like the Data Census Gov site. There may be a link, but there's a specific page where the U.S. Department of Justice asks for a special tabulation, and the U.S. Census Bureau produces that for our work. Those data come with a unique set of challenges, and I'm going to speak to what a couple of those are. But I want to start by saying, I'm going to conclude by saying that without the ACS, we do not have the data that we need to uphold the Voting Rights Act. So the VRA case, in these VRA cases, this Jingles test, and this is what I'm going to focus on, is that when you say that a racial or language minority group must be sufficiently large and geographically compact to constitute a minority, that's literally 50% plus one person. You could have a district with 50,000 people in it, and that language or minority group needs to have 25,001 people to satisfy that criteria. So when you think about the ACS data, their margins of error, and how those data are used, the determination of whether a district satisfies or does not satisfy Jingles 1 can come down to as few as one or a handful of people. These CVAP data that we use are critical to this test because they don't just measure how many voting age population there are, but they measure the citizen voting age population, the CVAP. And that is critical because that assesses the potential voting strength among the voting age population. Obviously, there are parts of this country where there are very small portions of the population. They might be minority, but there are small numbers of them who are citizens. So these VRA claims, there's kind of two different prongs that go down. One is that after a redistricting cycle like we have just been through, almost always states and local areas are going to get sued because somebody doesn't like how those districts are being drawn. And that's for a wide variety of reasons. These claims can also come out of nowhere in the middle of a decade, in the middle of a redistricting cycle, for a plan where the current system, someone decides that it's not fair or it doesn't comply with the Voting Rights Act. And those can be things such as at-large election systems or existing single-member systems that may not have ever elected a minority, and that minority population may have grown significantly in that area. So there's a lot of different places and ways that these cases can play out that depend on the ACS data. Since the 2020 census, the litigation that has gone on around this that has been dependent on the ACS data has been enormous. There's been almost 100 cases, and you can see that predominantly in this color-coded map. They're in the South, but there's other states around the United States where every level of government, every level of redistricting plans have been challenged. And those challenges are based on CVAP data. They're not based on the decennial census data that were used to draw those plans in the first place, because the CVAP data says, how did the draw originally based on census data impact the voting strength or the potential voting strength of minorities? The citizenship question, I think this is probably the most important slide I have to share with you today, is that this question around citizenship is foundational. It's a pivot point on our data collection on our nation's statistical system. You know, the citizenship question was asked in the decennial census for a long time. It was not asked recently, but it became a lightning rod during the 2020 census. And it is going to be a very significant and pivotal point in the development of the 2030 census. And I won't belabor the point, but as we go into the 2030 census development cycle, I argue that this citizenship question could have one of the most significant, if not the most significant impact of any question on the development of the 2030 census. There's a variety of work products that come out of the ACS, including standard reports. There's microdata, such public use microdata samples, and then special tabulations, which I told you about earlier, which are the data that we use for the redistricting and Voting Rights Act work. The data that comes out of the Census Bureau comes from the redistricting group, who I commend, applaud, and appreciate for the enormous work that they put into generating this file. It's a block group level file by race, estimating CVAP for the entire United States. It is the lowest level geography detailed race file that covers the entire United States of any work product published by the Census Bureau. This file, while it is voluminous and it represents an enormous effort, still has a significant amount of work that demographers need to do once they get their hands on it. There's issues such as these files are inconsistent, volatile from one year to the next. They can be inconsistent with the PL data file that we have. For example, you technically can't have more citizen voting age population than VAP, and this happens frequently in this file. The file is intended to be used in aggregate because there's such huge margins of error around individual block groups, yet many of the VRA cases and VRA remedial plans come down to literally one single block group and whether a block group is a majority minority district or not. And then last and not least is the fact that we have to build our redistricting plans on individual census blocks, not block groups. So the Census Bureau provides us with block group data, and then it is up to us as individual demographers to disaggregate those data, which we do using block level census data to come up with our own files that we have to represent in federal court as being our best work and representing a foundation of data from the Census Bureau when we adjudicate these cases. Let me just look at one or two examples of the issues that I just talked about. In this slide, you can see that this is a county level chart, and this shows that if you use the vintage of the ACS CVAP file centered on the 2020 census, that there are 570 counties in the United States centered on the 5-year data file that is centered on 2020. There are 570 counties in the United States that have more Hispanic CVAP than VAP. And I picked this example specifically because the Hispanic population is the one that tends to have the lowest rate of citizenship in the United States. So if anything, the values for CVAP, the rates of citizen voting age population among Hispanics should be lower than VAP in almost every case. Another example is this is a case that we had in a school district in Texas. This school district was sued because they had what was thought to be a majority minority population that was a combination of Asians and Black populations. This school district was sued because of this little red area right here. There was one block group that had a Black population in it. And when we looked at the Black population from the ACS CVAP file, it had 3 times as many any part Black population than the census was reporting. So this is one of these cases where we have a block group where the data are volatile and contradictory to what the census reported that makes these kinds of cases challenging. And in this case, it was a federal VRA case, and it was a big, long, hard case because of one block group of ACS data. That's how important ACS data are at small levels of geography. So the ACS data, I want to start concluding by saying they're foundational for the adjudication of VRA cases. The collection of these data in the census is very much in play. I think it's going to have a significant impact on the execution of the 2030 census. The development of these files that we use in Voting Rights at Work is enormous. And it's important to note that after these files are released, that's really just the starting point for demographers like myself and my peers to take those data and start going through another large amount of applied demographic and research work to get them ready for Voting Rights Act litigation. I want to conclude by thanking Diana, Lillian, Mark, and Joel and others for putting the session together. I want to give a shout out to James Whitehorn, who's the chief of the redistricting and VR Voting Rights Office, and his exceptional team of the Census Bureau. I want to thank my colleagues who I served with on the 2030 Census Advisory Committee, who our time together was cut short, but I appreciate that they served faithfully and tirelessly during our time together under Arturo and Nancy. And I want to thank you, the audience, for your use and your support of the American Community Survey. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. I'm going to introduce our next panelist, Melinda Vonstein. Melinda, if you could turn on your camera. She is a professional planner who has led the Greenways program at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission for over 7 years and currently serves as the Greenways Planning Studio lead. In this role, she inspires the commission's nearly 100 member communities in 15 counties to place green space, trails, and active transportation at the heart of their development plans. Melinda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joel. Let me get this presentation up. Good morning. So my name is Melinda Vonstein. I work for the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. So we are Central Ohio, or the Columbus, Ohio area's regional council of over 90 local governments. We serve as the metropolitan planning organization, allocating state and federal transportation funding to local governments. Beyond that, we serve our members in rural, suburban, and urban counties in a variety of other planning realms, such as housing, energy planning, economic development, and trail and green space planning, which is what I focus on at our organization as the Greenway Planning Studio lead. I'll also note that the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission is a national neighborhood indicators partner representing Central Ohio in collaboration with the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis at The Ohio State University. As a network partner, we support local priorities by connecting all of our communities with data covering a variety of subjects and provide assistance to those seeking to use the data. We have a whole team that helps our communities use this data. We also engage with other network partners to advocate for the use of local data to spur innovations and advance an equitable nation. I'll be sharing just one example of the ways we've used ACS data in our region, a very specific example that relates to my work. So Central Ohio is a growing region. We expect to be a region of over 3.1 million people by 2050. We're one of the fastest growing regions in the country and certainly in the Midwest. And so with that growing population, we know that there's going to be an increased demand for more walkable neighborhoods, transportation options, and outdoor recreation opportunities. People that are moving here and living here are demanding those sorts of amenities from us. And trails are becoming even more critical to the livability of our region. And this is something that we really started to recognize and plan for about 10 years ago when we created a community-supported vision to add over 500 miles of regional trails to an existing network of 230. Thanks to a prioritization project that was heavily rooted in ACS data, we realized that once 500-mile bold vision is actually fairly achievable for us. So just this year, we've expanded our vision to over 1,000 miles in 15 counties, really focusing on rural to urban connections and ensuring that we are able to provide a trail network that serves as a true backbone of active transportation and outdoor recreation in our region. So in 2020, with the pandemic top of mind, and with that bold regional trail vision top of mind as well, we got to work prioritizing segments of that regional trail vision in Franklin County, our most urbanized county. We looked at data related to connectivity, health, social equity, and economic indicators to help us rank the projects. For this prioritization process, we actually ignored feasibility, which was something that not everyone was supportive of when we first started talking about this project. Many people in our region suggested that we should be prioritizing the easy, cheap, low-hanging fruit first. However, we really wanted to see what trail projects within our vision offered the most benefit, regardless of the cost. Because we didn't know where the money was going to come from anyway. So why limit the prioritization based on cost? And we suspected the easy projects were not necessarily the ones the region needed the most. And we were correct. The 10 highest priority projects out of, I believe it was 53 projects in Franklin County, were hard, expensive projects that required us to cross railroads and highways, at major geographic barriers that required complicated engineering, a lot of money, and collaboration. We were also able to use census block group data to determine how many of our lowest income neighborhoods do have access to a trail today, and how many would have access once the regional trail vision was built out. We knew that, or we do know that our trail network, as the backbone of our active transportation network, is critical infrastructure for those without cars and some of our lowest income populations. So that was top of mind. I believe at the time of this prioritization effort, about 40% of our lowest income neighborhoods had access. But when the vision that we had at the time will be built out, nearly 70% of the lowest income neighborhoods in Franklin County would have connectivity. And I'm really excited that today, 9 of the top 10 highest priority projects that we identified just 4 years ago in this effort are being advanced in some way. So they're either in design, in construction, or have some sort of funding application out. So our regional partners in Franklin County really took this prioritization, and they recognized that these were the projects that needed to be built for our residents and that we needed to seek some funding to build. And furthermore, we have transformational funding to build not just 9 of the top 10 highest priority projects, but 25% of the COG vision, the Central Ohio Greenways vision in Franklin County, which is a pace that we never expected. 7 years ago when I started at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, we were not thinking that we would be building out a vision this quickly. There were people that were scoffing at how bold our vision was. So the fact that we're able to build out 25% in 5 years is pretty transformational. This is thanks to some reprioritization of state and federal funding to go towards standalone bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and then also an innovative voter-backed funding strategy through our transit organization, the Central Ohio Transit Authority. Just last year, voters supported a ballot initiative to add a small sales tax for transit services and for what we call transit supportive infrastructure, which are sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that connect to transit stops. So many of the trails in our vision are able to be funded through that transportation sales tax funding. So that's just an example of one of the ways our region uses ACS data.
Thank you very much, Melinda, for that presentation. And let me take this opportunity before introducing our next panelist to encourage members of the audience to submit questions in the Q&A section. and it's okay to submit them now as you're listening to our panelists, and we'll get to them at the end. So with that, let me introduce our third panelist, who is Rodolfo Gutierrez. Rodolfo, if you could turn on your camera. Hi. He is the executive director of ACS, where he has been serving since May 2007 with extensive professional experience in quantitative and qualitative research and evaluation. He is greatly committed to working with those interested in drawing a state of Minnesota where disparities are eliminated and are not based on ethnic or cultural differences. Originally from Mexico, Rodolfo has experience as a researcher in both Mexico and the US. His formal education includes a bachelor's and PhD in history and an MS in demography with extensive experience researching demographic change. Rodolfo, please tell us about your work with the ACS.
Sure. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And thank you everyone who are here. And I'm gonna share my presentation here. Here you go. So I wanna talk first about ACER, and ACER stands for Hispanic Advocacy and Community Empowerment Research. This is a singular organization, as we are one of the few that focuses on working specifically with a community that it is the Latino community, in this case in the Midwest, not only in Minnesota, but we also have work in North Dakota, Iowa, South Dakota, part of Wisconsin even, and sometimes we go national. So we are here in Minnesota, and we are very happy to really being here to talk about our work. ACER has been created a long time ago already, in 1988, with the intention of generating some information for people who wanted to do advocacy. And I want to say that not only organizations, but also governmental agencies and even private agencies that are working with Latino communities are using our data from a long time ago. And I am really, really glad to say that. As it was said before, our goal is just to generate the information that is necessary for the community, particularly the Latino community, to improve their living conditions within the state. The state of Minnesota today holds, according to the latest census results, about 400,000 people who are declaring themselves as with Latino origins. So either way, people who are from different countries immigrating to Minnesota, or others who are born in the U.S. with Latino ascendants. At this point, even the census reports, not the census, the American Community Survey reports that over 72% of the people who are holding the Latino ascendants in the state of Minnesota are born in the United States or acquired the citizenship in the country. So we have only 38% of the people who are immigrants, and the majority of them are documented immigrants in the state. So that is the data that the American Community Survey offers us. And that is important for us because the work we do requires of having precise information that it is not easy to access anywhere else. The American Community Survey then comes to be a very key tool for us to determine how to approach the community in Minnesota, the Latino community particularly, because otherwise we cannot identify several kinds of issues that we need to work with. Particularly when we talk about Latino communities, we are aware about the diversity of them. We are at least 32 different origins that are reported in the census that are also translated into the American Community Survey. And we use those data for us to approach those small communities that are hard to know about. So we do a lot of research in many different areas, name it from public health, immigration, economic access, whatever you want to think about based on demand. So if we find an organization that needs some information regarding public access to transportation, for example, just to follow up what we were hearing before with Melinda. So that is important for us to know where the communities are. There are other requests. We are partnering with a more equitable democracy organization nationwide to identify where people are participating in electoral processes. But small communities in Minnesota are more difficult. As today, according to ACS, over 72% of the population is concentrated in the metro area, all those of Latino origin. So when you think about statewide, you find several locations where the numbers are very, very small. So we need to go through the American Community Survey again to identify what are the characteristics of them. To this point, I want to just switch a little bit and go to an anecdote because the ACS reported, for example, for a small town that it's called Red Wing in Minnesota. Many of you might know it because it's very famous for the boots they produce and they sell worldwide. And they are very good, by the way, just look for them. So many of them are Latino workers who are producing those boots. And we went through the ACS and found out that most of the people were from either Mexico or Central America. So we needed to establish a survey or to implement a survey to know more about their needs in that small city because the government officials in the city wanted to work better with the Latino community. Our surprise was that when we went there, over 90% of the people were not from Mexico, not from Central America, but from South America. So the ACS gave us some sort of information that was kind of not necessarily the one we were having in Red Week. And there are two factors. One of them is the time we went there because it was at the end of the last census period. But also the second factor is that the sample the ACS had just was not necessarily the one that we wanted to have because they just found most of the people being of Mexican or Central American origin. But that helped us a lot based on those data to design a better survey for us to collect the information we needed. Another examples also, we are having some access to what is happening with the Latinos with disabilities in the state of Minnesota. We were looking for how they are doing in the state, how many services they have access to, and how many services they need to have access to. It was fantastic to find out that information, basically for us to approach that community because we found a sample in the ACS that told us about disability reported by communities in the survey. And we found out the way to connect with them and expand our sample size. The result was now we do have a very big and sustainable process of connecting with the Latino communities with and finding people and families with special needs, and they are being assisted by not only the state but also other providers in the state of Minnesota. So what I am trying to illustrate here is that we are having a lot of support from ACS, but also some problems, given the fact that we do have this configuration of our population. And also, I need to add, there is a lot of mobility. We do have many people staying in Minnesota for a while, but then going back to Illinois or Texas, California, wherever they are coming from, and that difficults everything. But ACS is our basic tool for us to design our approaches for research. Really appreciate this opportunity, and I am looking forward to connect with anybody here who wants to ask. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Rodolfo. Very interesting to hear about both how helpful the ACS can be and a bit about the limitations that you run into. So now I'll turn to our final panelist, Bob Coates. Bob, if you could turn on your camera. Hi. So Bob is an analyst in the Demographic and Economic Analysis section of the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management, or OSBM. He's the governor's census liaison and the coordinator of the North Carolina State Data Center Network, a partnership between the U.S. Census Bureau and 45 affiliate organizations statewide. He was elected to 3 terms on the National State Data Center Steering Committee, serving as steering committee chair for 5 years. Bob has worked with data in state government for over 30 years. Bob, please tell us why the ACS is so important to the work that you do.
Thank you, Joel, and thanks everyone for having me here today. As Joel mentioned, I'm in the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management, and within that role, we provide, the office is technically under the governor's office, and our role is to provide information to design the governor's budget each year and to administer the budget throughout the decade. So to do that, it's critical for us to have as much reliable information down to small level areas for administering programs and factoring those into the budget. And the ACS is a key component of that. However, it's not the only tool that's out there. It's not the only source of data. So within the data center role, we have a tool within the Office of State Budget and Management, the LINK system. And I'll have some information about that in just a little bit, that combines the tip of the iceberg of really outstanding data from the ACS and from other census resources with other federal data resources and state resources to provide a tool that is open facing, it's open data format, to allow folks to do analysis to serve whatever needs they have. But what I really want to focus on during our conversation here today is how that preparation and how the tools that we develop were able to pivot and use ACS in a very dynamic and fundamental way to deal with Hurricane Helene's visit to the western part of the state last fall. So let me share my slides here. And hope you can see those, and we will get going. So before we dive into it, I do want to mention that aside from being an OSBM, North Carolina has a Geographic Information Coordinating Council, the GICC, that has representatives from all state agencies. There's a local government working group that collaborates with county and municipal governments. We also have a federal interagency group that works with federal data providers and users to make sure that as we develop geospatial resources within the state of North Carolina, we're meeting as many needs as possible, where we're not reinventing the wheel, we're being collaborative in what we're doing, and we're trying to advance state needs going forward. As part of the GICC, we have a master address file for the state, a seamless parcels resource. We're developing a building footprints resource. As all these tools are being developed, there is a census working group that I chair, so that as we're developing these things, we're keeping census needs in mind. Unfortunately, with Hurricane Helene's visit, I guess the silver lining to that visit is this was a great opportunity for us to turn around and talk about how those geospatial preparations combined with census data to meet a very serious need for the state. So what you're seeing right now is the National Weather Service precipitation map from the week of September 23rd through the 30th. And you'll see the really dark blue areas there are the heaviest rainfall. That's 30 inches or more that fell in western North Carolina. So what our office was tasked with in working with other federal partners, and specifically our emergency management agencies in the state, was really a twofold task during this event. The very first part was the emergency response folks. How do we get to people, get them out of the area, get them the help that they need in a life and death situation? And the second part of that is more long-term. How do we assess the damage that went on, and how do we prepare a strategy for getting aid and resources into those areas to help people recover, people and businesses recover long-term? So, as I mentioned, we had talked about a lot of preparations geospatially and data response wise. ACS really came into its own at this point, and this is a slide that we used for the North Carolina GIS conference back in March. The ACS data really shone through here because we were able to let those emergency responders know. These are the folks that you see in the blue rafts there as they were going into these very remote areas in Western North Carolina into the mountains of where population may be at a very small level. What the occupancy status may be looking like. We have a lot of housing units in the mountains of North Carolina that are seasonal in nature. So how many of those might be occupied at a given time? We provided those first responders information on what the characteristics of the population they may be reaching out to are. What's the disability status? Where were children involved? Where were seniors involved? And that's critical, obviously, because you can see there's never going to be enough emergency response in a large situation like this. So we wanted to be as tactical and get people to get the help to where people were or where we knew they could be. And then for the damage needs assessment following up on that, we're looking at, okay, well, how many structures were damaged? What was the value of those structures? When were they built? What's it going to cost to rebuild a structure now that may have been a 30 or older year old structure? What's the vehicle availability? What's the impact on infrastructure? So all of this was informed by a wealth of data from ACS. So to provide that information, I mentioned the tool that we have within the Office of State Budget and Management. It's called the LINC system, LINC. And you have a link to it there at the top. Anyone's able to go and visit it at any time. Going into the Helene's recovery efforts and response efforts, we did bring in the latest ACS data at the block group level into its own data set. This data set was used by the analysts within the office that were, everyone was on 24/7 response time. And we also shared this with our emergency response teams. We're able to highlight specific counties, and then within those counties, we can highlight given tracks and given block groups to find out some of the key indicators that were really driving where responders were going to, but also influencing some of the models for inputs for what's the damage needs assessment and recovery going to be looking like for a long time. A lot of this information, the system allows us to output this with GIS-backed components so that this blended in with the floodplain mapping, with when we were looking at the downstream impacts of landslides, flooding, roads being washed out. We were able to grab the component block groups and say, this is the community, or these are the populations and the characteristics of the folks that we think are going to need help. So the ACS was really critical in being that first step of how do we get responders into an area and what does that long-term recovery look like? Based on the data set that we have there, we were able to marry the ACS data with other data that we have coming from state agencies as the emergency areas, the disaster areas were being defined and updated. Additional counties were being added. So analysts within the office and responders needed to be able to say, okay, if this county is added to the disaster area, what are the impacts? What are the population changes to our response teams? What are the other indicators that may be influencing us? If you go to this visualization, and again, I've given you the link here, it brings in things like the number of hospital beds that are available in these given counties, enrollment in things like home schools, community colleges. So we're looking at school-age populations, children impacted, miles of roadage, paved and unpaved roads. So these are data sets that are being brought in from other non-ACS areas that are tied with the ACS information and tied with population projections from our state demographer to give us an idea of what needs really look like and how we respond to those. So again, having this information quickly at hand to kind of inform the initial steps, we were getting more critical feedback from those first responders who were in the boats, boots on the ground, who were in the landslide areas, giving us feedback on what was actually going on in the areas, but to educate them and direct them in the most strategic manner, the ACS data was really vital. So I wanted to point out, so if you remember that very first slide that we saw, the precipitation map was from September 23rd through September 30th of 2024. These next slides are from our office's response and presentations to our General Assembly on October 23rd. So exactly a month following the hurricane making landfall in Florida, we were able to present the damage needs assessment to our General Assembly and get resources to the people who were most heavily impacted in Western North Carolina. That less than a month turnaround and doing the assessment going to our decision makers and getting aid back to the people would not have been possible if the ACS data wasn't available at that granular level. So this is very tip of the iceberg, but the next two slides come from the presentation from our state budget officer to our General Assembly. So 30 plus inches of rainfall in less than a week. About 1,500 landslides across the western part of the state. It was a 1,000-year-plus flood event. Unfortunately, the casualty numbers rose after this slide was created. So we have over 100 persons who lost their lives in North Carolina because of Helene. 900,000 homes and businesses were without power, and 39 FEMA declared disaster counties. So a lot of these data that you will see here, the survivors in Western North Carolina and the types of support that they'll need, you'll see a lot of the things here are directly tied to ACS. So population over the age of 65, the poverty population without health insurance coverage, disability status, the housing burden cost. These are directly tied to the ACS data, and it really put in scope as we're talking to our General Assembly members, how much money is going to be needed to help these folks get through the next couple of weeks, but also start rebuilding their lives. These are the lives that they had before that happened, and ACS was really a driving factor of informing them. So if you'd like to see the full write-up, this is the damage needs assessment that is available on the OSBM website. You have the URL at the header of this slide. The final assessment was $59.6 billion. This was in December, so the secondary follow-up to the original October damage needs assessment. And I don't want to wrap up my comments here without giving a huge thank you to the U.S. Census Bureau for actually sending a team to the emergency response headquarters in Hickory, North Carolina, right outside the heaviest impacted area, to provide data support to those first responder folks who were going out there, for providing maps or taking data, that ACS data, and applying. They're doing overlays at very small levels to inform folks how to get to people and meet the needs who are out there. And just finally, here's my contact information. Happy to follow up with any questions that folks may have.
Thanks very much, Bob. That is a great way to wrap up, because it's just an incredible story about how the ACS can help play a part in disaster relief and understanding those affected populations. So thank you very much for that. So what I'd like to do now is have all of our panelists turn on their camera, and I'm going to ask a few questions, and then I'll also read out a few questions coming from the audience. Again, I encourage audience members to post their questions in Q&A. I see that a few of them have been posted and some of them have been answered, so we'll get to them shortly. But let me start by asking about the question of data uncertainty, because we know that's a big part of ACS data. I see that so many of you work with block group level ACS data, and so it's important to know and understand the limitations of our data sets and that underlying uncertainty. And in this vein, how does ACS sampling error or margins of error limit your use of ACS data? Are there methods that you use to mitigate the impact of sampling error, like data aggregation? How do you communicate data uncertainty to those who are relying on your analysis? And I think it's interesting. It might be interesting for Tom to expand on this, because it's like you mentioned the potential of a citizenship question, and I was reminded that there was such a correlation from Census Bureau studies between the posing of a citizenship question and reduced response rates from particular households and omissions from the census. So I wonder if you could talk about that balancing act potentially of like maybe trading one kind of uncertainty for another. But it's really up to you. How do you handle this question of data uncertainty? I pose that to all of our panelists, and you're free to jump in, whoever is interested in talking first. Maybe Bob, with this great example that we had. Did that play a part, looking at sampling reliability issues, in your response and your summary of data and your presentation of data on Hurricane Helene?
Yeah, I think with the folks out west, especially in directing the limited numbers of responders that we had, we were obviously going to be sending the folks into areas where we had the most confidence that there were going to be people in need. So if there were areas that seemed like they were going to be more remote, it was simply an area, it was a need of prioritizing where most likely people were going to be given the information that we had. And then the overlay with that, you mentioned aggregation. So the block group level data was being overlaid with maps that were showing landslides don't just go in a line, they fan out. What sort of infrastructure, what sorts of communities. So as we start looking at additional neighboring block groups and the populations that were there, we recognize that the tool was not ideal, but we also recognize this was the best source of information that we had. So we were making informed decisions about where to send people, where we were most confident that populations were. There were other sources of information coming in as well. So we had 911 calls coming in from first responders that were also driving that information. On the back end of things, I mentioned if there is a silver lining to this, as we have been talking with local governments, this has been an opportunity to say this is the importance of your responding to ACS if you're sampled. God, we hope this never happens again, but having reliable information is directly tied to your responses to these surveys. So we're also saying this is where it comes back to help you, and this is why it matters that you participate. Again, we recognize it's not ideal. And also another task that we do within the office in looking at environmental justice with transportation development issues around the state. Those are frequently tied to block group level data from ACS. We use the data with the margins of error to say it's not ideal data. We recognize there's some fuzziness on this, but we can look at changes over time and say we have some confidence that the folks in need in this area are increasing or decreasing. So again, we made the best effort with the tools that we had, and we just communicated that in the clearest way possible to the folks who are making very rapid decisions on how to help people.
That's really great. I was going to ask about this, that how panelists convey to end users that do they give attribution to the Census Bureau so that we can collectively support the ACS and let people know that how valuable of a resource it is. I can Tom, how about I come back to you on that question of data uncertainty?
Thank you, Joel. In the environment that I work in, it is federal courts, federal circuit courts, and we have had numerous, I can't honestly count, U.S. Supreme Court cases now over the last 4 years that I've participated in, where the ACS data has been used and tortured and presented in every way imaginable. And the courts so far have come down and said, look, we don't care about margins of error. We don't care about sampling error. We don't care about non-sampling error. ACS CBAP data, it is what it is. And it doesn't matter if it's completely inconsistent with what the decennial census says. It does not matter. If there's 50% of a population and one person, then it is fair game for litigation under the Voting Rights Act. Now, that said, we continue to find cases such as the school district where I showed you in Texas, where it's a single block group. This isn't a matter of like aggregate error and multiple pieces of geography and the totality of error. It's one piece that says the entire case is on a piece of geography, that when you compare that piece with the decennial census or other information such as the number of registered voters, who we know who they are, we know where the registered voters are, and we know, that they have gotten a race or ethnic identity tagged to them through what's called Bayesian inference surname geocoding. There's a lot of information that will say, the ACS data in this piece of geography, it's good. And the courts have used the CVAP data and these other pieces of information to support the ACS in cases where it agrees with the hypothesis that the VRA has been violated. What we're looking at is, what are all these other pieces of information, and what do they tell us about a totally inconsistent piece of ACS data for one piece of geography when it's inconsistent with the hypothesis that the VRA has been violated. So this is an open and ongoing question in the courts, the highest courts in our great country, but it is something that is going to continue to be pursued and questioned and challenged, because it is that one piece of geography and that error is decisive in one of the biggest, most important pieces of federal legislation in our country.
Maybe that's a good time to ask our first question, audience question, about wedding ACS data with other information. I feel like Rodolfo's presentation, he talked about conducting a survey in this small town and seeing how that information was at odds with the ACS. So it's good for us to go in eyes wide open. There are limitations to the ACS, as great as it is, and know that there's other sources that can give us information and help us triangulate to the truth. So let me ask this question from the audience. When working with ACS data, how have you integrated? It just popped away. How have you integrated it with other outside information? Yeah. So open question to all of our panelists.
I can just mention quickly that, when we have these Federal Voting Rights Act cases, that all of these data, the CVAP data, the decennial census data, and voter registration data are all used together. It's a mosaic of data that presents insight for the court, who are not demographers. Our job is to give them information and translate it using these different kinds of information together, and to synthesize them into information that a court can then use to decide, has the VRA been violated here or not. So it's the art and the science of this is taking something that can be very complex, joining it with other pieces of big, heavy, complicated information, and then making it so easy to understand that you and I can just sit here and have a conversation over lunch about it.
I can jump in and say also that at ACER we recognize that there are other sources of information, like telephone company records, where they do tell you the information as well. And there are survey organizations or survey companies that are offering you the product that you might need. They are expensive. So many times we are going through some other alternative options. And those are coming out from what we know from services that are provided by agencies from the local government. And that have helped us a lot. Like, for example, in the case I was talking about in Red Wing, we did have information from the local transportation office, and also the police department. They did have kind of an exercise to identify the community, and they did have that information. It was very kind of, say, not complete information, but helped us in approaching in a better way the communities we were working with. And also, I am a member of the Minnesotans for the Americans Community Survey, MAX. It's a nonprofit that also promotes some approach to the local government, the legislators, and all that, who have different sources of information that so many times they are willing to help us out when we ask for that. So we are lucky to have that approach with that kind of, say, sources of information within MAX. And the local state demographer also have a lot of resources that are complementing. And I must say there are two other agencies, is Wilder Research and Rainbow Research. They do have databases that are generated through many different sources that are available for everyone, non-demographers, but also for people who might need some information that are very useful for them at the moment they are writing a proposal or something like that.
I want to take advantage of this chance. We have a number of audience polls, so I want to take this opportunity to follow up on something that Bob said, and ask everyone. Yeah, to what extent do you are you and your colleagues and your organizations aware of the, I mean, not you so much, but organizations and end users aware of the value of ACS data and its importance to your work? Do you have any ideas how we could more explicitly credit the Census Bureau and the ACS when using their data? And then I'm going to ask Mark and Lillian if we could post a poll, because we talked about some challenges. We heard about challenges earlier from the Census Bureau. Ron Jarman mentioned about how we've lost over 1,000 Census Bureau staffers, and so this is a challenging time. So it's important for us to be supporting the Census Bureau and talking about how valuable the ACS data is that we use, and conveying that to end users. But let me just pose this audience question um, about the challenges facing the ACS. So if we can post this, we'll try a poll just to get the audience um, participating in this. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the ACS today? And then I'll circle back uh, with our panelists to talk about those challenges, and then more beyond what Bob has said. If you can tell us more about how you trumpet the value of the ACS. So, audience members, let's see if this flashes up. This poll flashes up soon. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing the ACS today? And I think it'll. Oh, I see. Yeah. So if you click on polls, right, it's flashing up. If you click on polls, you'll see this poll. Is it A, threats to respondent privacy, B, insufficient funding, C, declining response rates, D, the potential use of administrative data, um, or E, census staffing reductions? So we've got a lot of responses, but I still see some updates coming in. When I see that start to slow down, I will talk about the results and then hand it over to our panelists to see if they agree and other ways that they are advertising to end users about the value of the ACS. So maybe it's an okay time. We've got a lot of responses, well over 200. No, I see still some updates. I'll jump in. This is a very close vote. Declining response rates seems to be in the lead, and census staffing reductions, which is that loss of 1,000 staffers is a very large portion of the overall Census Bureau staff. So that's a second, but it's pretty close. And then insufficient funding, threats to respondent privacy, and then last, the potential use of administrative data. We heard from Donna Daly about the use of administrative data to fill in that acreage question. But actually, census staffing reduction has sort of taken this. Okay, so that's an interesting poll. What are your thoughts on this? Melinda, can I call on you? What do you think? to what degree are end users aware of the value of ACS when you were coming up with this prioritization technique?
Yeah, so we have a whole team here at Morpsey that is more intimately involved in using the ACS data. I don't know how much the end users, the people that I'm talking to, are aware of how important the ACS data is. Our team does use and credit the ACS on visuals and all of our projects that we complete. But I'm probably not the best person within our organization to answer this question. I'm more kind of focused on using the data to make change in our community and build consensus around our projects.
How about you, Rodolfo?
Yeah, first, I think from Max, what we learned is that there is also some kind of voices that are running out from legislators, both local and national legislators, who are telling that the ACS is kind of invasion of your privacy. So there is a movement that we've been dealing with and trying to convince them otherwise that the ACS is coming into your house and asking several questions. I personally was really excited when my household was selected in the sample for the ACS because a demographer being part of the sample. Yeah, so it was really exciting. But so many people were like, "No, no, this is not happening. I mean, in my house." So many rejection to answer, like declining response rates is important, and we need to think about the reason of that. So when we did see this kind of statements, it was a worrisome. So I think it is really important for us also to recognize other elements that are influencing all these kind of the challenges we are facing in order for us to address it. The MAX, the Minnesotans for the American Community Survey, encompasses over 200 members, users of ACS, data users from the University of Minnesota, local chamber of commerce, things like that. So they are very active in promoting and talking to people and legislators about the importance of the ACS, because otherwise we are going to lose a very valuable and vital source of information. It is what is happening in Minnesota, and I guess we need to really look at it nationally speaking.
Very, very interesting. I've also experienced that and heard about that. People concerned about this invasion of privacy and what is the ACS. And as I recall, there was an officer that the Census Bureau had for a respondent advocacy officer. I'm not sure if that still exists. Bob, I see you shaking your head. Is that that?
I think the role it was retitled as like ombudsman for a while, but that role did exist.
Mm-hmm. All right. So as we're running out of time, I want to quickly go to some other audience questions. So I see the first question: how do you explain the reliability, accuracy of the ACS data when you report it? Okay, this feels like it's connected with our last an earlier question. I find the word estimates really turns people off sometimes, and I've heard several folks discount the whole thing as totally inaccurate, which I think is due to lower data literacy. I think it's a really good point. It's like trying to toe the line, trying to strike the balance of between conveying to end users, hey, there's limitations here, but hey, this is also still the most reliable wall-to-wall survey that we have for this country. So, what about that? Is there a concern that people just don't trust it, and it's just they say, well, all these statistics, you can't trust them anyways? Have you run into that? Has anybody run into that?
Yeah, I think I have, but I also agree with the questioner who said, in some ways, I do think it's a little bit about, I don't know if data literacy is the term to use, but I think in most of our states, but especially here in North Carolina, our population has become much more mobile. We've got migration within the state, we've got migration from outside the state. And then we have Western North Carolina with the mountains and then the coast. We've got a lot of seasonal housing units, vacation units. So when we tell the story of the ACS and we talk about, what your population looks like if you're in coastal North Carolina is going to be very different in July and August than it will be in April. So having a tool that captures that, what your community looks like over time, gives us a better picture on how to plan, fund, and service your communities. And the ACS is the tool to do that. As we are looking at communities and we're seeing a lot of change because of migration, knowing that we have a tool where the yardstick, okay, maybe it's not perfect, but it's the same yardstick that's being used for your community as the community across the state or across the country that you're doing comparative analysis. So knowing that the foundational methodologies are the same gives you some strength of comparison. So when we talk about, when we explain the evolution, the birth of the ACS, how we got to this point, and how that data is collected, I think folks buy into it a little bit more. I'm glad to hear Rodolfo was included in the survey. I've been sampled twice, so maybe being on this panel puts you at the top of the list for being sampled. But having that conversation too, when I usually am part of presentations, I ask people if they've been sampled. Most of them have not heard of the ACS. They just know it's census data. So that gets the door open for us to have this conversation.
Adam Poor on our team, on our data team, would say, "What's the alternative?" Just to, go off gut feeling.
Right, and sometimes that's right. The ACS is the only option, right? Let me go to another question. Melinda, would you talk more about how you think the data / analysis help build consensus among the groups with different views, in parentheses, city, suburbs, rural, advocates, government agencies, and resident groups?
Yeah, absolutely. Our prioritization effort, we had stakeholders from all of our different local governments at the table. We had advocates at the table, and we were building consensus on the whole process of prioritizing, from the data sets we were using to our strategy. And one of the strategies that I think was particularly useful in building consensus was, we had a network of 500 miles that we were trying to prioritize, and they weren't divided up into projects yet. It's just kind of a vision of where we want trails. So in order to prioritize segments, we had to divide up the network, and we didn't divide up the network or end segments at jurisdictional boundaries. We ended segments at places that were logical endpoints for a trail user. So at major activity centers, or where a trail intersected or connected to an existing trail. And what that gave us was a prioritization that told us where the most useful, beneficial trail segments would be. And in order to build a lot of those, we needed collaboration across many different jurisdictions. So a lot of the projects that we have under design and funded today are collaborative projects. One is a collaboration with nearly 7 different local governments who kind of came together and submitted a joint application for a multi-million-dollar project. So the way in which we did our prioritization effort by kind of forced people to collaborate in order to get these projects built.
Well, we are basically at time. So I just want to thank all of our audience members for asking all of these great questions, and thanks to our panelists for your insights, and our profound thanks to the Census Bureau for providing the country with this valuable resource. We will now have a 15-minute break. Yep, we're right at time, and reconvene for your choice of 3 different sessions at 1 p.m. Thanks, everybody, very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Joel.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.